though you're probably not aware, you lost the man who saved your life on October 17, 1962. U.S. spy planes had photographed Russian missiles in Cuba capable of hitting Washington and the entire East Coast. Kennedy announced a blockade of Cuba.
This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island.
And Kennedy's generals and advisors were telling him that he and they should slip away to the safety of bomb shelters, attack the missile sites, and then launch a full-scale invasion of Cuba. They assured Kennedy that the Russian missiles were not ready, but that they should all go to bomb shelters anyway, just to be safe, and leave the rest of us out to die. Kennedy thought about it, and then he told them that nobody was going anywhere, that if anyone died, they would be the first to go, sitting as they were in the White House, the prime target of those Russian missiles. And Kennedy suggested that, with this new perspective, they should all work out another, safer plan. It turns out that the generals were wrong. The Russian missiles were not only ready, they were armed with nuclear warheads which the local commanders were authorized to use if attacked. Kennedy saved the world and you from nuclear holocaust that day, a holocaust that almost certainly would have killed everyone in the Northern Hemisphere. Eisenhower warned us that the greatest threat to American security came from
the military-industrial complex.
And Kennedy heard him. And then he called on the world to strengthen the United Nations organization, to help them not just to rein in the military-industrial complex, but to eliminate it completely. Before he died, Kennedy told the United Nations,
"For in the development of this organization rests the only true alternative to war, and war appeals no longer as a rational alternative. For a nuclear disaster spread by wind and water and fear could well engulf the great and the small, the rich and the poor, the committed and the uncommitted alike. Mankind must put an end to war, or war will put an end to mankind. It is therefore our intention to challenge the Soviet Union, not to an arms race, but to a peace race, to advance together, step by step, stage by stage, until general and complete disarmament has been achieved. Under the eyes of an international disarmament organization, a steady reduction in force, both nuclear and conventional, until it has abolished all armies and all weapons, except those needed for internal order and a new United Nations peace force. And it starts that process now, today, even as the talks begin. Never have the nations of the world had so much to lose or so much to gain. Together we shall save our planet, or together we shall perish in its flames.
What a terrible crime and what a terrible loss to lose this man. And, as we should be, the world is still haunted by our failure to act.
Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind.
So, what do you think of the case so far? We've established Hunt as a first-level supervisor of the assassins. He is connected to Prescott Bush through Harriman. And he is also connected to Prescott through Nixon. It will probably surprise you to learn that very early on, many key people knew that the CIA, through its Cuban and Mafia operatives, had killed the president. It was not a very well-kept secret. Just one example is that Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Haynes Johnson says that he was in the room when Robert Kennedy, on the afternoon of the murder, blamed the assassination on the CIA and their anti-Castro Cubans. And there's reason to think that Hoover also knew most of the details of the assassination even before it happened. In 1960, 3 years before the assassination, Hoover himself wrote a memo about Lee Harvey Oswald's involvement with the CIA. 3 years before the assassination, Oswald was on Hoover's personal radar as being CIA involved. Just amazing. And apparently just the beginning of a long and beautiful relationship between Hoover and Oswald. You see, at the opening session of the Warren Commission's official investigation into the Kennedy assassination, this man, the Attorney General of the state of Texas, Wagoner Carr, calls up the commissioners and says he thinks, "Y'all ought to know your boy Lee Oswald was working for the FBI on the payroll getting $200 a month with the ID number S179. The commissioners decided not to even ask Hoover about it. Why? My guess is they were scared to death he might admit his relationship with Oswald. And there's powerful evidence that Oswald was working for the FBI, spying for them on the CIA. In 1963, Kennedy called in Hoover and ordered him to locate the secret training camps that the CIA was using to train their anti-Castro Cubans for terrorist raids against Cuba. He didn't want another missile crisis. The camps were so secret not even the president knew the location. But Kennedy ordered Hoover to find them and to shut them down. And Delphine Roberts, a secretary who helped run the CIA's camp at Lake Pontchartrain, Louisiana, told the Warren Commission she saw Lee Harvey Oswald at the camp just days before the FBI raided it and seized all the weapons and shut it down. Oswald's closest known associate in New Orleans worked at this garage, where Oswald used to hang out with him. This witness told the Warren Commission that he saw Oswald exchange envelopes outside the garage with men that he took to be FBI agents. And you remember Marita Lorenz. She says Oswald was at the meeting in Dallas the day before the assassination when Hunt walked in and started passing out maps and money. William Walters, a clerk at the FBI, produced a memo from Hoover warning of a coming assassination attempt on November 22nd in Dallas. Hoover knew.
These people have given me a hearing without legal representation or anything. I didn't shoot anybody, no, sir.
And if Oswald was his informant, he knew plenty. Remember, too, Hoover knew that the Bushes were Nazis. The biggest American Nazis, the ones who supported and employed Prescott Bush, were not Hoover's friends. He had busted them in 1942, and now they had set up his most important undercover informant for the murder of the president. But so now, with all that in mind, look at this bombshell that Hoover dropped on the Bushes 5 days after the assassination. It was released by the FBI in 1977, hidden under a pile 100,000 pages high. It took 15 years for researchers to find it. It was never classified and would have been widely distributed, so Hoover's not speaking frankly here. We have to read between the lines. It's signed by J. Edgar Hoover himself, and the title is Assassination of President John F. Kennedy. That's a big hint, I think, as to what the memo is about. It says that it's about a meeting that took place between the FBI and the CIA the day after the assassination. The memo says that the FBI had been investigating a possible threat from what Hoover calls a misguided anti-Castro group. A misguided anti-Castro group. The memo doesn't say that members of some misguided anti-Castro group killed Kennedy, but Hoover undoubtedly knew that they had. What the memo does do is name Mr. George Bush of the Central Intelligence Agency as a CIA officer associated with the CIA's misguided anti-Castro groups. It suggests that Bush was the person at the CIA responsible for these people. And in stark black and white, it says that the CIA sent Mr. George Bush to Washington the day after the assassination to answer for them, when the FBI had questions about the activities of some misguided anti-Castro group. The memo was a scandal when it was made public in 1988, because it says that George Bush was in the CIA in 1963. It means that Bush lied, committed perjury when he told the Senate under oath that he had no CIA experience before becoming director in 1974. It means that he was in the CIA when he ran for Senate and lost in 1964, and when he ran for Senate and lost in 1970. And it means that he was in the CIA when Nixon brought Bush into the White House, trailing E. Howard Hunt behind him.